When it started, I told myself it was harmless. Just a moment, a fleeting escape from the quiet, predictable life I'd built. But standing here now, looking back, I realize how wrong I was. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't fleeting. It wasn't simple. It was a choice. One I made over and over again, ignoring the little voice that whispered, "This will end badly." And yet, I kept going. I wasn't thinking about consequences. I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself. It felt like I had stepped into a new world, one where rules didn't apply, where the guilt wasn't loud enough to stop me. He was 19, full of confidence and charm, and for reasons I still can't explain, I let him fill a space in me I thought had been empty for too long. I crossed the line, and in doing so, I changed everything I thought I understood about who I was, about what love was supposed to mean, about the promises I thought I'd never break. I didn't realize then how much I was risking. I didn't realize how far this would take me, or how much it would cost. I never thought I'd find myself in this place, standing on the edge of everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. I'd been married for over a decade. My husband is a good man, dependable, hardworking. He's provided for us in every way that matters. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. But something started to shift over the years. We stopped talking about the little things, the important things, the things that made us feel alive. It was as if we were living parallel lives under the same roof, together but not connected. I felt invisible, like I'd faded into the background of my own life. And then there was him, the boy next door. Or should I say, the man. 19 years old, but you wouldn't think it to look at him. He carried himself with a confidence that made you forget his age, with this quiet charm that seemed almost impossible to resist. He wasn't loud or flashy, but there was something about the way he looked at you, like he really saw you, that made you want to stay just a little longer. At first, it was just polite conversation in passing, comments about the weather, a laugh about something trivial. But then those moments grew. I started looking for reasons to be outside when he was. I started noticing things about him I had no business noticing. And the worst part, he noticed me too. There's something intoxicating about being seen, really seen, when you've spent years feeling like you're nothing more than an afterthought. It wasn't long before our conversations weren't just polite anymore. There was a spark, a tension I couldn't ignore. I told myself it was harmless, that it was all in my head, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew better. I knew it was a line I wasn't supposed to cross. I just didn't realize how much crossing it would cost me. He lived just next door, always polite, always kind. This boy made me think the world still had a few good souls left. At first, our interactions were so ordinary they barely registered. Just waves and smiles as he walked past, a quick comment about the weather or the garden. But as time went on, those moments started to feel different. I found myself looking forward to seeing him. It wasn't something I planned, but I'd step outside at just the right time, hoping for one of those small, casual exchanges. It wasn't long before those quick greetings turned into longer conversations. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world worth talking to. I can't explain it. It wasn't just his charm, though he had plenty of that. It was the way he listened. He really listened. He wasn't distracted or in a rush. He gave me his full attention. And I realized how long it had been since someone had done that. I started sharing things with him. Little things at first. Stories about my day, frustrations I couldn't quite put into words. But then, without even noticing it was happening, I began to tell him more. I'd talk about how lonely I'd been, how disconnected I felt from my husband, how I sometimes wondered if this was all life had to offer. And he listened, always. He'd nod, he'd ask the right questions, he'd say the things I needed to hear. It felt like he understood me in a way that no one else did. There was one moment that stands out, though. We were talking in the driveway, and I laughed at something he said. It was nothing, really, just a silly joke. But the way he looked at me in that moment, it was as though I was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. I felt my stomach tighten, and my heart raced in a way I hadn't felt in years. I knew then that this was no longer just a friendly connection. The boundaries started to blur after that. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a comment that lingered a little too long in my mind, or a glance that felt heavier than it should have. He complimented my dress once, and the way he said it wasn't like a boy complimenting his neighbor. It was something else, something more. I laughed it off, but I felt it. I felt the thrill, the rush, the danger of it all, and I hated myself for loving it. It was risky, of course. I knew that. I knew what I was playing with, but it felt so good to be noticed, to be admired. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing would come of it, that I was strong enough to keep it from going any further. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was already too far in, and the line I promised myself I'd never cross was getting harder and harder to see. I can still remember the exact moment it happened, the moment everything changed. We were in the backyard. My husband was at work and the kids were at school. I was planting flowers, something to pass the time, something to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. He walked over, casual as always, with that easy smile of his. We started talking just like we always did, and for a while it was nothing more than friendly chatter. But then I noticed the way he was looking at me, like he was trying to memorize every detail, and I didn't look away. I don't know what came over me. One moment we were talking, laughing, and the next he reached out and touched my hand. It was so small, so innocent on the surface, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. I didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the line I was about to cross. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was wrong. But I leaned in anyway, and he met me halfway. That kiss. It was everything I hadn't felt in years. It was passion. It was desire. It was wrong in every possible way, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing that mattered. When it was over, we both stood there, stunned. He said my name, softly, almost like a question, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to feel. Excitement? Guilt? Fear? It was all of those things, swirling together so fast I couldn't separate one from the other. After that, it was like a dam had broken. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he made me feel. Alive. Wanted. Important. We started finding excuses to see each other, to steal little moments when no one else was around. And every time, I told myself it would be the last, but it never was. And balancing everything became exhausting. By day, I was the wife, the mother, the woman who had it all together. But underneath, I was someone else entirely. I'd smile at my husband over dinner, all the while thinking about the texts I'd send as soon as he fell asleep. I'd kiss my kids goodnight and wonder if they could sense the cracks in the person they thought I was. At first, the affair felt like an escape, like a secret little world where nothing could hurt me. But secrets have a weight to them, and that weight started pressing down on me in ways I hadn't expected. The guilt was there, creeping in at the edges of my mind, no matter how hard I tried to push it away. And then there were the close calls. The moments where I thought someone had seen something, noticed something. Like the time my husband walked in just as I was putting my phone down, his eyes narrowing for a split second before he said anything. Or the way my neighbor looked at me when she saw him leaving my house one afternoon. I started to feel like I was walking on a tightrope, one misstep away from everything coming crashing down. But even then, even as the cracks in my marriage started to show, I couldn't stop. I couldn't let go. He had become my escape, my addiction, and I was too far in to imagine walking away. Things started to change between us, and not in a good way. At first, it was little things. He'd get upset if I didn't answer his texts right away, or if I couldn't find time to see him. But then, his moodiness turned into something heavier. He'd accuse me of lying, of not caring about him as much as he cared about me. I tried to reassure him, to keep things light like they had been in the beginning, but it felt like we were pulling in opposite directions. End quote. The more he clung to me, the more suffocated I felt. I started dreading the very thing that once gave me so much excitement. Instead of feeling alive, I felt trapped. I knew he was young, that he didn't understand the complexities of what we were doing, but I didn't know how to tell him that it was too much. He was possessive in a way I wasn't prepared for, constantly needing validation that I couldn't give him. And it wasn't just him. I wasn't the person I thought I'd be in this either. The thrill had faded, and all that was left was stress and guilt. One night, my husband came home late. He was exhausted but still smiled at me as he walked through the door. He sat down and told me about how he'd stayed late at work to make sure a problem was resolved so he wouldn't have to bring it home to me and the kids. And then he said, "I know I've been distant, but I'm going to do better. You and the kids, you're everything to me." Hearing those words broke something inside me. I wanted to cry, not because of what he said, but because I knew I didn't deserve it. Here he was, this man who had done nothing but try to take care of us, and I had betrayed him in the worst way. He didn't know it, of course. He had no idea what I'd been doing. But his kindness, his willingness to keep trying even when things weren't perfect, it hit me like a brick. I started seeing the cracks the affair had left in my life. The lies I'd told, the time I'd stolen from my family, the way I'd started to pull away from the people who mattered most. And for what? A connection that had turned toxic, a relationship that was never meant to last. It wasn't worth it. None of it was. Ending it wasn't easy. When I told him, he didn't take it well. He accused me of leading him on, of using him, of throwing him away when he wasn't convenient anymore. And maybe he wasn't wrong, but I couldn't keep going, not when it was tearing me apart inside. I told him it was over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The days that followed were hard. I'd see him outside and my stomach would knot up with guilt and regret. I'd hear my phone buzz and feel a pang of panic, wondering if it was him. But slowly, I started to feel something else. Relief. Relief that the secrets were over, that I didn't have to live this double life anymore. I began to see my husband in a new light. The little things he did, the way he tried to make our lives better, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, they started to mean something again. For the first time in years, I realized just how much I had to lose. And I vowed, right then and there, never to let it happen again. Letting go wasn't just about ending the affair. It was about reclaiming myself, my family, my life. And as painful as it was the only decision I could make. It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. But after ending the affair, I found myself looking at my husband in a way I hadn't in years. It was like a fog had lifted, and I could finally see him for who he was. The man who had stood by me, even when I didn't deserve it. The man who had given me a family, a home, a life I had taken for granted. I started to notice the little things. The way he made sure my coffee was ready in the morning before I even came downstairs. The way he'd laugh when the kids did something silly, his eyes crinkling in that familiar way I used to love. The way he always double-checked that the doors were locked at night, not because he didn't trust me to do it, but because he wanted to make sure we were safe. These were things he had always done, but I had stopped seeing them for what they were. Proof of his love and commitment. At first, I didn't know how to bridge the gap that had grown between us. I didn't know how to start a conversation that wasn't about bills or schedules or chores. But I knew I had to try. So one evening after the kids were in bed, I sat down next to him on the couch and just started talking. I told him about my day, about the things I'd been thinking about, and To my surprise, he listened. Really listened. And then he started sharing, too. Little things at first, but enough to remind me of who he was and why I fell in love with him all those years ago. We began to spend more time together, just the two of us. We'd go for walks in the evenings or sit on the porch after the kids were asleep. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk. We'd just sit there, enjoying each other's presence. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was real. And slowly, it started to feel like we were finding our way back to each other. Our intimacy changed too. It wasn't just about physical connection. It was about trust, about being vulnerable in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in a long time. For the first time in years, it felt like we were partners again, not just two people sharing a house and responsibilities. And that feeling, it made me fall in love with him all over again. Looking back, I realize how much I had underestimated the power of the simple things: communication, gratitude, loyalty. I had spent so much time looking for something exciting, something new, that I forgot the value of what I already had. My husband wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but he had always been there, quietly holding everything together. And it was my turn to do the same. If I've learned anything from this, it's that love isn't just about the big moments. It's about the quiet ones, the ones where you show up day after day, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when you're not sure what the next step looks like. It's about choosing each other again and again, no matter what. When I think about everything that happened, I can't escape the weight of my choices. I made mistakes, huge mistakes, that could have destroyed the very foundation of my life. I betrayed my husband, my family, and in so many ways myself. I allowed myself to believe that I was entitled to something more, something different, without realizing that what I already had was more than enough. But here's the thing about mistakes. They can either define you or teach you. For the longest time, I let mine define me. I saw myself as the woman who strayed, the woman who couldn't appreciate what she had. But as time passed and the chaos settled, I began to see that my mistakes didn't have to be the end of my story. They could be a lesson, a turning point, a reminder of what truly matters. My husband didn't know what I had done, and maybe he never will. But what I do know is that his actions, his unwavering dedication to our family, are what saved us. He didn't give up on me, even when I didn't deserve his love. He showed me, through his consistency and his kindness, what it means to truly commit to someone. He reminded me that love isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet. It's in the things you do every day to show someone that they matter. I'm grateful for the second chance I've been given. A chance to be better, to rebuild what I almost destroyed, to prove that I am worthy of the love I've been shown. I don't take it for granted anymore. I know now that love isn't just something you feel. It's something you choose. And every day, I choose my husband. I choose my family. I choose to be the person they deserve. If you've ever felt lost in your marriage or your relationship, if you've ever doubted whether it was worth saving, I want you to know that it's never too late to try. It's not easy, and it takes work, real work. But if you're willing to fight for it, the rewards are worth every ounce of effort. What about you? Have you ever struggled to reconnect with your partner? What helped you find your way back? Or maybe you're still searching for that connection. Whatever your story, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe your journey can inspire someone else, just like I've been inspired to change mine.
If this story resonated with you or gave you something to think about, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more stories like this, and if you have your own experiences or thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Leave a comment below and join the conversation. For more heartfelt and thought-provoking relationship stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.